Hi and welcome. I'm Jennifer Kent, Vice President of Research with Parks Associates, and I'm so pleased to be joined here today by Razvan Toder, who's the Director of Connected Home Security with Bitdefender. Hi, Razvan. How are you?
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So, Razvan, from your perspective, what industry and consumer trends have really shaped the last several years in the smart home space?
I think that's we could be here for hours if we started on this subject. Really, I think it's interesting to see how it evolved because it all started from some devices that control your temperature in your house, and maybe some devices that control your lights. And here we are today with devices that do facial recognition, that learn your behavior. Uh, we talk about the sentient home that knows how you feel and is able to take some measures before you actually need them. So I think the smart home subject has evolved tremendously, and it's been pushed by the technology that allowed the devices to be, um, let's say, smarter and smarter, and to make our lives easier and easier.
How do you think the companies are really delivering on that promise of the smarter home, the more intelligent home, being able to understand context? Do you feel like that's coming all the way through uh, to the users, from your perspective?
Um, Yeah. So from one side, I think it's they're doing a great job. They're leveraging the technology, and they're able to make the devices smarter, and then to make them able to fit in your life as easily and as fast as possible, which is why we see such a fast adoption of devices these days, because people buy more and more devices, and our homes become smarter and smarter. And it's not necessarily, even we're not even talking about smart homes. It's even more than that. It's a smart environment, because we take our wearables with us. We have smart cars, so we actually have like this digital environment that follows us everywhere. On the other hand, where I see maybe a challenge, I don't want to call it a problem, but it's definitely a challenge, is that in order for these devices to be really smart, they need to know a lot about us. So they are crunching a lot of our personal information. And this is where we see the main challenge with smart home and smart devices, is the fact that they will pose, and they are already posing, privacy and identity protection issues. And this is where I would like to see companies taking a more, I don't know, drastic measures.
Is there anything about the role of technology and how it's evolving that can better meet that challenge for companies in the space?
Well, definitely. I mean, if you look at how connection to these devices has evolved from, let's say, a few years ago, they were mostly, you could connect if you were within range, and now most of the smart devices, they have a cloud service, they have better authentication. And so this is a good step towards let's say, a better privacy, better security of these devices. And also with technology, is we're able to scale down on the number of private information, or of number of things we crunch about our users' lives, and still deliver the same functionality. So this is another way to address the privacy issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Of course, then that has to be communicated back to the end user of what advancements are happening in this space. We know from Parks Associates data that one of the major barriers to buying smart home devices is a concern about privacy and security. And so, do you have any thoughts about how to communicate that back to the end user and assure consumers that the smart devices they're using in their home are secure and they can trust them?
Well, yeah, we agree with your point of view. So the main concern of consumers is actually privacy these days, and we see that usually they go. There are certain brands that have established themselves as taking. privacy and identity as a serious matter. But we also see a great opportunity for ISPs and telcos, so the connectivity providers, to secure the connection and actually secure the digital environment of the user, secure all the devices. So we see that there's a two-way approach. One is with device manufacturers being more and more responsible these days, and the other is the actual connectivity provider making sure that the connection is sanitized, that those devices only access clean URLs, that the traffic does not contain attacks, and so on.
Mhm. So, what does the next phase in the smart home space look like to you?
Well, I think it's only going to accelerate. I think it's a bit ironic because we see that the end users are more and more concerned about these things that we talked about: privacy, identity protection, and so on. But at the same time, they expect smarter and smarter devices, and they want more and more devices. So I can only see that um, our homes will become smarter and smarter because technology is accelerating, and this can only help this subject.
Well, Razvan, thank you very much for your thoughts and your insights today. We look forward to talking about these and many other trends impacting the smart home market throughout our Connections US series and sessions. Thanks so much.
Thank you too. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Tuya Smart is a leading global IoT cloud platform that connects the intelligent needs of brands, OEMs, developers, and retail chains. The platform provides developers with a one-stop IoT PaaS-level solution that contains hardware development tools, global cloud services, and smart business platform development, offering comprehensive ecosystem empowerment from technology to marketing channels to build the world's leading IoT cloud platform. The scope of Tuya's business covers the whole chain from smart manufacturing to the application of smart scenes. At the same time, encouraged by the online and offline channel resources of the service providers, integrators, and operators in Tuya's ecosystem, Tuya can help our brand customers to sell smart devices to the entire world. Tuya collaborates closely with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Samsung. Our platform is one of the first that integrates Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and Samsung SmartThings at the same time. We enable brands to solve product development problems such as high development costs, long development cycles, and technical challenges and roadblocks, so that even companies with zero experience can quickly enter into the IoT space and enhance their product competitiveness. Tuya Smart is a leading global IoT cloud platform based on the underlying IoT PaaS-level technical support. We have developed smart business solutions for various industries, including smart home builders, hotels, security, community, apartment, and commercial lighting. The infrastructure behind our platform includes Cloud Plus networking module plus app to enable the rapid development of smart products. We introduced the Power by Tuya labeled PBT to demonstrate the interconnection of products built on our platform. Products bearing the PBT label can be easily controlled by the same app, regardless of brand or category. The Powered by Tuya solution is elegantly simple for brands to interconnect. By the end of December 31st, 2020, the Tuya IoT development platform has served over 262,000 developers around the world, with over 122 million daily AI voice interactions. The platform receives 84 billion device requests daily. Tuya had smart-enabled more than 252,000 devices SKUs, and now the devices are available in more than 220 countries and regions, covering over 100,000 sales channels all over the world.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Jennifer Kent, Vice President of Research with Parks Associates, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Ann Ferguson, who's the Vice President of Marketing with Alarm.com. Hi, Ann, how are you?
Hi, Jennifer. I'm doing very well. Good to see you today.
Good to see you as well. Thanks so much for sharing your time and insights with us today. We wanted to learn from Alarm.com's perspective, from your perspective, what industry and consumer trends you're seeing that are really shaping the residential security space right now.
There are so many. I mean, it's really been an exciting time to be in this space because there are so many technological advances happening. At the same time, consumers are really ramping up their adoption of security and smart home services. So, really exciting time to be in this space. And a couple of the things that we've seen evolving over the last year plus, and that we think will continue for the next year, are around things like thinking beyond just perimeter protection. So historically, as consumers thought about security, it was primarily around protecting the outside of their home and making sure bad guys didn't get into the home. But increasingly, smart home services are able to help consumers protect everything inside the home as well, and to understand what's happening inside the home. So whether it's protection from water damage and leaks or mold in the home, for example, there's just new ways of thinking about protection beyond just that very traditional sort of perimeter protection, which is obviously still very important. Another area of tremendous growth, I think not surprisingly, has been in video. Certainly, newer cameras and technologies like video analytics that make video services so much more useful for consumers have really helped to drive demand. And certainly the doorbell camera has been a tremendous new use case for consumers. And the adoption of that service has just been, I think, beyond what really anyone would have imagined. But what that's done is it's also gotten consumers thinking about other ways that video can be useful. And in particular, we're seeing an increased adoption and excitement around other interior video use cases. So, similar to what I was saying about security, video for a long time was just used for exterior perimeter protection. But now, especially these days, when a lot of us are still at home, we are working from home, we are schooling our children from home, thinking about indoor video use cases where I can do things like be in one room of the house, but quickly use video to check in and make sure that my kids are actually online and in school the way that they should be. A year ago, that's not something that I would have considered, and now it's invaluable to me. So I think we're starting to see a lot more in the way of utility around interior video use cases. And then one of the last areas that really has an impact on everything that we're doing is thinking about the impact of AI and how that is fueling so much in the way of efficiency and greater usefulness of smart home and security services. And I'll just give one quick example. One of the features that Alarm.com offers is called unexpected activity alerts. And with that feature, the system in the home starts to learn what normal patterns look like. And then when anything unusual happens, you'll automatically get an alert about that. So, for example, early on in COVID, actually, it was one of the first days that we were home. I got an unexpected activity alert that my patio door had opened in mid-afternoon, around 2 o'clock, I think. And that was very unusual. That wouldn't have normally happened on a weekday, but the system recognized that was unusual and immediately let me know. And the great thing about that is I didn't have to set up a whole lot of complex rules to get that notification. The system just automatically knew and it was able to understand what was normal. And when something unusual happened, it let me know very quickly. So again, just an incredibly useful feature and something that is a good example of how AI is really making smart home more useful, accessible, and I think safer for consumers as well.
Yeah, one of the knocks on the earlier generation of smart home solutions is that they may have been connected but not smart yet.
Yeah.
So, are you seeing the technology evolve such that it is becoming more intuitive and intelligent and really solving some pain points for consumers?
Absolutely. And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of where AI can really be beneficial for consumers. One of the other things that we've seen really significant adoption of has been a feature called Scenes, where it's very simple, but it's just a single tap in the app that allows multiple different things to happen at the same time. So, for example, a wake up scene. I can simply tap in the app and then I can have relevant doors unlock, the security system can disarm, certain lights can turn on. And it just makes it easier. That's one tap instead of 4 or 5 taps. And I can customize those scenes very specifically to my home, my family, and to our needs. So, rather than having to open up 5 different apps to do 5 different things, I've got this singular experience where all the different smart devices are working in concert with one another to deliver a great experience for me.
Yeah, and that ease of use and the customization is really where the rub has come, because no household's the same, no house layout is the same. Different households have different numbers of household family members, and so trying to make it easy to customize is really a difficult thing. Well, what do you think the next phase in the smart home looks like?
I think it's going to be a continued evolution of bringing more and more into the fold. If we go back probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, I don't think that most of us in the security industry could have imagined that we would be talking about water protection solutions, for example, or connected car solutions. But we really are able to take so many different mission critical systems in the home, and now even with something like car outside of the home, and connect them all together. And we're really excited to continue to see that happening.
Yeah, that ecosystem does seem to continue to grow and expand and push the boundaries of what's included in the smart home. So very exciting to watch. Thank you, Anne, for joining us today and giving us a little bit of your thoughts of how this market is shaping and growing. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always happy to talk with you.
Welcome to Parks Associates' 25th year of Connections, the premier connected home conference. This virtual series will be hosted across 2021, bringing together a community of industry leaders in the connected home industries. In the 20-plus years that Parks Associates has hosted Connections, the connected home has evolved from a high-end concept towards a mass market opportunity with incredible revenue potential. Today, several high-profile market disruptions are emerging as a result of broadband adoption, smartphone usage, and consumer expectations for connectivity solutions that provide a personalized experience. Our 2021 sponsors are making all of this possible. Thank you to our sponsors for their support this year. Our analyst and visionary insights will feature executives in the connected entertainment and digital home technology industries. We hope you can join us for these upcoming sessions or watch past session replays. On March 24th, we will cover smart products serving the SMB market. Join us on May 12th for supporting remote workers with a smarter home. On May 25th and 26th, we will host a 2-day conference to talk about the state of the smart home, pro installers in home technology, home service opportunities, and sensor innovation and AI driving new use cases. We will be back on July 14th for MDUs scaling up, on August 18th, state of the home security market, September 22nd, home networking and Wi-Fi, and finally on November 9th and 10th, join us for 4 more sessions: Smart Home, Battle of the Platforms, Privacy and Security, Europe and the Smart Home, and Insurance and Smart Home. Thank you for joining us at Connections today and throughout 2021. We are happy to have you here and look forward to your feedback. If you miss a live session, you can go back at any time to watch on demand. Go to Watch Replays and click on the session that you want to view. Have you created your own event agenda in SwapCard? Visit the Agenda and Watch Replay tabs to add sessions that interest you to your own event. You can go back to My Event to revisit any bookmarked sessions, sponsors, and items. We want to make sure that you're connecting with our industry-leading sponsors. You can interact with them by visiting the Booths and the Sponsor tab. You can also bookmark sponsors or add items to your event to view later. Sponsors have uploaded extra materials for attendees. Make sure to visit sponsors that interest you to chat with one of their team members or save documents for later. We have dedicated meeting slots set up for break times between sessions. Continue the discussion by requesting meetings from others in the SwapCard platform. Schedule a meeting with another attendee or a sponsor by visiting their page. The panelists and speakers will be addressing your questions live during the stream. During the stream, use the question tab to ask your questions early in the presentation. Go to the poll tab to answer polls that will be discussed during the live stream. If you need help navigating SwapCard, please reach out to our team by mentioning @Parks Associates in the chat box or by contacting one of our team members via our company page.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Kent, Vice President of Research at Parks Associates. Welcome, perhaps welcome back to Parks Associates Connection Series. Today, we are looking at research and talking to industry leaders about supporting remote workers with a smarter home, smarter products, and connectivity services. This marks our 25th year of this Connections Conference, and we couldn't do it without our sponsors. So thank you to our sponsors. We really couldn't host these events without your support. And in this unique year, that's really more true than ever. So thank you to Alarm.com, to Calix, to Cox Communities. Thank you SmartRent, Bitdefender, Tuya, Ayla Networks, Plume, and AirTies. We really appreciate your support. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the industry organizations and media organizations that also support Parks Associates Connections community, including CEDIA, SCTE, the Monitoring Association, the Z-Wave Alliance, Zonda, the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, ESA, and the Home Grid Forum. Being virtual in 2021 allows us to host sessions all year long. So as Elizabeth was just mentioning, be sure to mark your calendars for upcoming sessions on the state of the smart home, installation trends. We'll be talking later in this May about home service opportunities and new use cases driven by sensors and AI and much more across the year. But today we are focusing on technologies, services, and providers who are helping businesses and consumers pivot to new work realities. I'll start our session off with a little bit of context and some Parks Associates research on the theme. Then we have a visionary insight talk from Nicole Zhang, who's the founder and CMO of Minim. Then Parks Associates President Elizabeth Parks will come in for an executive Q&A chat with David Henry, who's the SVP of Connected Home Products with Netgear. We'll then dive into a full discussion panel with industry experts from Everise, Cox, and Zoby, as well as welcome Nicole back from Minim to join us on the panel. And as a reminder, we'd love your participation throughout our sessions. So please make use of that Q&A tab and the chat tabs and answer those polling questions in the polling tab. So we'll be taking your questions and looking at the polling results in our sessions today. Finally, at 2:45, all audience attendees and speakers are invited to join us in a breakout networking discussion to keep this conversation going out into the virtual hallway and hear what your experiences and thoughts are on our topic. So today I'm going to share some of our latest research and focus in on some of the key impacts of COVID-19 on how work happens and the opportunities to serve employers and consumers in new ways. I want to focus on the size of the opportunity in front of those in the technology products and services space, the shifting work landscape, and the very real concerns that both employers and consumers have about the new work environment. First, it's perhaps not commonly noted enough that over 99% of all businesses in the United States are small businesses, equating to over 30 million businesses, according to the Small Business Administration. And these SMBs create 1.5 million jobs annually and typically account for 64% of new jobs created in the US. Yet we know that many did not survive the pandemic. Yelp reported that nearly 100,000 establishments in the US had permanently closed by September of 2020, many of which were restaurants, boutique retailers, personal care services, and fitness businesses. But those that did survive the early days of the pandemic had to pivot to digital connected services to continue to serve customers and also to keep their employees working and operations going. Parks Associates surveyed small and medium businesses in the second half of 2020 and found that half of SMBs, representing some 10 million companies, had at least some employees working remotely. And while that shift to remote work has helped many SMBs continue to operate while keeping employees and customers safe, it certainly has its own challenges. For instance, effective onboarding of new hires is really particularly tough with a distributed team, right? Also, equipment provisioning and handoff, equipment returns with staff turnover make for really tough IT challenges for businesses of all sizes. SMBs with remote employees express a variety of IT concerns. 1/2 are concerned about the cybersecurity of remote employees' home networks. Businesses of all sizes with a newly remote workforce have been forced into equipment conditions that are likely less secure with poorer performance than the business's on-site networking and equipment setup. Businesses fear that remote work exposes them to new vulnerabilities and that they're ill-equipped to meet their remote workers' technical support needs. And really, these concerns are not trivial. Those small businesses that told us they are at risk of going out of business actually showed higher than average concerns across the board. For instance, 47% of at-risk SMBs are very concerned about their remote employees' home internet reliability, compared to just 28% on average. And we find that upload speed is a major concern for remote employee productivity, and of course, of particular concern to those businesses that deliver their products and services digitally. Relatedly, 35% of SMBs with remote workers want the ability to prioritize business traffic over their employees' personal data traffic. Ultimately, these concerns represent a pretty clear business opportunity for ISPs, network security providers, and premium technical support players to extend their commercial grade services into the home. Now, the model of mass full-time work from home that we saw during the height of the pandemic is not likely to last at that scale, right? And already we're starting to see that subside for some businesses in some locations. Companies are moving forward with a pretty wide variety of models, and we expect the rest of 2021 to be a time of experimentation for employers. Consider just a few models here that large employers that like Google, JP Morgan Chase, and Adobe have announced. Google's announced it will allow about 1/5 of its staff to work from home permanently, and another 20% of its staff to shift to different geographic locations. Others will move to a hybrid arrangement with about 3 days in the office each week. So certainly very much a hybrid model for Google. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, announced in April that he expects nearly all of the bank's 250,000 employees to come back to the office after the pandemic, with just a few employees in very specific roles able to engage in a hybrid or full work-at-home arrangement. Adobe is focusing on the tools that employees need to shift on-site, to work on-site in new ways or off-site. The company rolled out a new employee app called Adobe Life that allows in-person and remote employees to access health and wellness tools, to order food from the office cafe, to book meeting space, and to make appointments with IT staff, all from their work app. Small businesses also see a variety of work circumstances in their future. About 1/5 of all SMBs report that they expect the number of part-time and full-time employees working from home to increase permanently. But that number jumps, of course, to over 30% among those businesses delivering services digitally. So this really speaks to the wide variety of business types and really the split in work conditions that we saw during the height of the pandemic, right? Where those in retail and food and beverage and healthcare and other consumer-facing businesses really requiring on-site staff, while those that can work and deliver goods and services remotely do. There remains much work to do, however, to help businesses and employees navigate a new world where at least partial remote work is more standard and really an expected factor of employment. The new tools that were scaled up quickly to keep the lights on, if you will, now need more secure, sustainable foundations. And nowhere is the need for stronger foundations more evident than in the need for stronger cybersecurity measures. We're seeing high concern for cybersecurity, and that's really reflected in the strong number of SMBs likely to purchase cybersecurity services. 32% said they are likely to purchase cybersecurity solutions for remote employees in the 6 months following the survey. That said, demand for services is just as strong for premium conferencing services, remote tech support, and better broadband access for employees. Altogether, 43% of SMBs are very likely to invest in additional IT capabilities to support remote work over the next 6 months. Now, let me draw out a little bit that really the significance of what we're talking about here with the distributed workforce, at least part-time, and employers willing to pay for the equipment and connectivity that services that employees need to be successful at home. There's an opportunity to serve business customers across many locations where there may have been just one service line needed in the past. That is to actually multiply service lines for a single business customer. The prospect of a second dedicated broadband line for work at home could really spur broadband subscription growth to a level we haven't seen for years, as adoption of fixed broadband in the home has largely plateaued and growth has slowed. And employers are really paying for some IT equipment and services at home already. In fact, 2/3 of SMBs with multiple employees, right, so not just solo owned operated businesses, are paying for at least one product or service that we tested, from smartphones to laptops to the home internet service itself or a technical support service. Now, employers may pay for their employees' home internet service or smartphone bill via just reimbursement rather than as a direct payer. But with so many employees working directly, I think ISPs may investigate whether a more direct pay solution is viable at scale, allowing employers to opt in and pay for higher tiered broadband services for their remote employees directly. Now, let's take a look from the consumer perspective. Generally speaking, the majority of consumers have come out of the pandemic with a new mindset about technology. They understand the necessity and value of technology to keep them connected and well and safe, right? But much of that depends first on connectivity in the home. First, the necessity for households to have fixed or at least mobile broadband in the home, and then for that service to be reliable and capable of strong performance under new strains. Over the past year, we saw over 50% of consumers in broadband households report that they increased their broadband usage due to COVID-19 related changes. Among those households with increased broadband use, almost 70% report that their increased use is due to their household engaging in more activities that use a lot of internet capacity. And a majority say they simply have more devices in use in their home as well. About 1 in 10 households told us that they have already proactively upgraded their broadband service during the pandemic, paying a higher price to get faster internet speeds. And the number one reason they said they did that was to get higher speeds to support their remote work. And finally, about a quarter reported an intention to upgrade their internet speeds over the next 6 months. Of course, beyond the performance of the pipe coming into the house, the home network needs to function well to support remote work too. Yet 41% of broadband households report that their connected devices drop off of their Wi-Fi networks. And it's really the top technical support issue for connected devices in the home. And we expect Wi-Fi to continue to be a problem for consumers as more and more devices are added to the network. Additionally, consumers have major concerns about the security of their home networks. When gauging interest in advanced router features, the number one feature of interest is a router with protection against malware and cybersecurity threats and hacking. 62% of households with a router said that they were highly interested in data security protection, beating out interest in parental controls, beating out better network range even. And 68% of those interested in advanced cybersecurity would pay for the feature either through a monthly subscription fee or a one-time payment or bundling it all into the price of an advanced router. In reality, all channels from ISPs to security dealers to system integrators are in a position to advise consumers on optimizing their home networks. The user experience of their services really depends on it. And finally, I just want to speak quickly, more specifically about the consumer mindset about work in their own personal space. We sought to understand how consumers thought about their homes, about their physical spaces, and whether their homes were serving them well as they rethink their household patterns and needs. And about 1/3 of consumers have made or plan to make changes to their homes to create better workspace for themselves or for other household members. I think this really speaks to the long-term thinking of consumers when it comes to their own expectations of where work is going to happen for themselves, right? And interestingly, we see this really strongly among consumers living in multifamily residences, like apartments and condos. In fact, 35% told us they want an apartment with a built-in office space in their unit, and 30% want their properties to provide a common office area that's available to residents as an amenity. And our data indicates that they're willing to pay a premium for properties, for homes that are optimized for work. In our Q4 2020 survey, MDU renters indicated a willingness to pay on average an additional $14 to $25 per month on rent for various rental features that we tested, from touchless building entry and lighting controls to personal outdoor space to air purification. We also tested specifically consumers' interest in office space in the unit and common office space. MDU renters reported an average willingness to pay an additional $25 per month in rent for built-in office space and $19 per month additional in rent for a common office space area. It's a pretty significant opportunity for MDU developers and property management groups, equating to roughly $1.1 to $1.8 billion in add-on revenue opportunity annually. Again, I think this really speaks to consumers' expectation that they will need spaces, services, and products that will support them in working from home in the long term. So as we dive into this session today, we will discuss with expert speakers providing consumers and businesses with connectivity services and products how to better support remote workers and their employers at home. We'll discuss the challenges that are really inherent in a distributed workforce, the logistics of keeping remote workers connected. We'll talk about those cybersecurity vulnerabilities and the best methods to guard against them. We'll talk about balancing employee productivity and concerns about employee productivity, as well as employee burnout and employees' concerns about their own privacy and that relationship with their employer as new tracking products come to market. New hybrid and hub and spoke models of work and what that means. And finally, opportunities for service providers, for smart home players, for device manufacturers to support new work patterns. So with that, I'd like to invite our first industry speaker to join me today. Nicole Howard-Zhang is the CMO of Minim and advising CMO at Aliro Quantum. While at Minim, she's been recognized by Entrepreneur as a top female founder in the United States. Prior to Minim, Nicole held the position of Chief Marketing Officer at cloud software companies Antidote Technologies and OnSIP. Nicole, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Awesome. Sharing my screen here. Can everyone see my screen? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for joining, and thanks to Jennifer and Parks Associates for inviting me to be the Visionary Insight speaker. My name is Nicole Zhang, and as Jennifer mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Minim. At Minim, we deliver AI-driven management, Wi-Fi management, and security products to businesses, service providers, and smart homes. I'm excited to be with you here today to talk about the future of work and serving your business and consumer customers. This is kind of a fun topic because we all share a common experience. I'm sure that you've been working from home for the past year quite a bit and that you have your own battle stories. So it's easy to put ourselves in the customer's shoes, which is kind of special. So first, a bit about me, your speaker. I'm coming to you from Southampton. My company, Minim, is the exclusive trademark license holder for Motorola connectivity products in leading retailers and Amazon. And as I mentioned, we work with about 130 ISPs and service providers to deliver a fully managed Wi-Fi solution as well as cybersecurity. I'm going to skip down because Jennifer did such a great job at introducing me. So let's just go ahead and talk about the future of work. Today, we'll talk about how the future of work is an ultra-connected, hybrid, and hub-and-spoke movement. We'll touch upon workplace technology imperatives, including cybersecurity and human resource management. And I'd like to present to you the changing role of business IT, who is your decision maker when it comes to serving businesses, and how if you're not already servicing businesses, well, you just might. So let's start with an axiom. We thought that our businesses were already connected with computers, voice over IP, cloud computing, BYOD policies, but the future of work is ultra connected. The pandemic has accelerated digital transformation in the vast majority of industries. Restaurants, they already had online ordering and delivering. They're developing new food tracking mechanisms because a lot of people are ordering. And also they've just implemented contactless menus and contactless ordering experiences that make Wi-Fi in the restaurant imperative. In construction, we've seen a rise of smart buildings, and now we will see more smart connectivity solutions go in those buildings to better ventilate the air, to put in sensors, no-touch doors, and more. Hospitality, the check-in experience is going virtual and contactless. Public areas will be outfitted with ventilation and automatic cleaning systems that are connected. And in retail, we've seen a shift. 40% of sales have gone online, and also a big boost in roadside pickup. And that's all supported by call centers that have gone remote. And what's more, the in-store experience will be meshed with the online experience and, again, contactless. So across all of these industries, especially that you see here, the pandemic has exploded remote working, 90% in professional services. Companies have benefited from a 45% increase in productivity, according to Harvard Business School. And we'll talk about other benefits, particularly on the panel. But what are some of the downfalls? Surveys show that employee connectivity, burnout, and innovative collaboration are a concern. 85% of employees in a recent survey said that they would like to return to the office in some capacity. And the most popular ask I've seen is about 2 to 3 days per week in talking with other executives and surveying our own team. So this has led to the emergence of hybrid, the ability to work in an office and at home flexibly, and for the office to become a place for collaboration. Hybrid leaders include Ford, Citigroup, Target, and Microsoft. There's plenty of other companies that, as Jennifer mentioned, Google, that are writing about their new policies. And what's going to happen is that even SMBs, which make up the majority, are going to need to adopt models such as this in order to compete for talent, which, by the way, now the big fangs can come in and start competing for talent in your local community. So it's important to maintain those benefits. But what does hybrid really mean in terms of the business setup? Does it mean big, expensive office space that will sit at half capacity? Pinterest thinks not. They made a headline last year when they paid almost $90 million to cancel a corporate office lease in San Francisco. And their business was doing just fine. Their stock was up 90% at the time. So in the new model, businesses are leaning towards hub and spoke. And the idea is that the company can downsize the central office and create spokes of remote workers and less expensive satellite offices with better capacity planning and collaboration spaces. For larger companies, this also delivers the flexibility to create spokes in lower living cost areas and near concentrations of employees, also great cost-saving measures, and also well-liked by employees who could have an office closer by. It expands the talent pool access. So, of course, 87% of executives that were surveyed by PwC recently said that they are making changes to their real estate strategy in the next 12 months. So why is this important for smart home product and service providers like yourselves? Well, you'll see a picture of large corporations is changing to look like scattered remote workers, and smaller offices will look a lot more like SMBs, even falling out of the corporate environment. So these big companies are moving to more of an SMB and remote worker model. And then SMBs are already there and will also be flexing their models. So this is going to change the physical space and the IT buying needs. And to achieve this, businesses will need to reevaluate their small office technology and connectivity solutions. So let's move on to a quick poll. We've incorporated a couple of these. So do you expect your employer to change your work environment going forward? And I'm going to invite Jennifer to run this poll.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So we are seeing results coming in, and it looks like 75% say yes, they do expect their employer to change their work environment going forward.
Awesome. So we're all in the same boat. Well, not all, but majority. Okay. So let's dive back into the world of smaller office locations and remote workers. Parks Associates has researched SMBs and smart connectivity products and found that 58% of SMBs use connected safety and security products, 36% use smart energy management products, and 16% use smart speakers and smart display products. So lots of smart connected devices going into these smaller office settings. And then on the remote worker side, of course, we know the stats. 25% of homes have smart speakers nowadays, an average of 12 connected devices, growing to 20 by 2025. So in summary, the workplace is going to get ultra connected, hybrid, and it's going to move to smaller office environments. And with that will come a demand for smart home and office devices. It'll create a lot of opportunities for us to serve businesses and employees in new and exciting ways. So let's talk about one. Cybersecurity imperatives in hybrid remote work. So more small networks and remote networks means a bigger threatscape and frankly, chaos. The information technology teams were already stretched thin, and now they have a much increased burden. IT departments that we've interviewed have reported a 40% uplift in help calls, and employees need help with connectivity issues and other, security questions. And meanwhile, the IT department has no network visibility and no central management. And then there's the growing threatscape. Employees are accessing corporate systems and cloud platforms, often through insecure routers and from a network that's packed with vulnerable IoT devices. Our Minim platform tracks 38% of homes have malware threats in any given month, and many consumer IoT devices don't receive updates regularly and, of course, are not capable of running antivirus. Not to mention, with smart speakers and cameras, there's a recording concern. So imagine your CEO is practicing giving the earnings presentation, highly confidential information for public companies, and a smart speaker that's been hacked via a password breach is now listening in and creating a recording. So the first instinct when the pandemic hit for IT was to lean on VPN. And we saw a global increase in VPN utilization of 165%. And then if you are a VPN user, you probably experienced sluggish performance. And besides, it only provides partial coverage. And let's talk about why. Traditionally, IT manages the office, but traditional enterprise network security technologies will fall short. They simply weren't built for the smart home. Traditional corporate VPN to firewall only protects PC traffic, usually split with DNS for performance reasons, and it's very expensive and requires customization, often tier 3 IT support to maintain. And you're still not protecting the router or the IoT devices, and perhaps most importantly, if the PC or the router is compromised, VPN won't help when the employee connects to a cloud platform such as Salesforce to access patient or customer data. Endpoint security, on the other hand, is nice for laptops, but what about that Nest thermostat, Roomba, and Peloton? You can't deploy endpoint protection to these devices. And if the devices are talking to your laptop, it can turn that VPN into an attack conduit rather than a protector. Finally, remote access solutions can allow IT departments to see the PC happenings, but that can be easily exploited and commonly used to launch attacks. So while these traditional technologies fall short, that's not to say that they don't have a place in the overall picture, but something else is definitely needed. So where the old paradigm was IT managed office, ISP managed home, the new paradigm might be co-managed. Service and smart home technology providers can deliver a level of access to employees to get help, as well as to IT departments. So specifically for ISPs with managed Wi-Fi and security services, I've depicted Minim here to help visualize. There are a few key ingredients for success, and that includes auto-assisted home and office Wi-Fi for the contactless technology and smart devices. So with the proliferation of thousands of IoT devices and generations, the solution must keep up on fingerprinting as well as provide assisted help. And by assisted help, I mean, is there an easy mobile app for the satellite office, or is there an easy mobile app for the remote employee? And on the flip side, can you give the IT department an easy web app or downloadable app to see, what's going on in their remote locations? Secondly, simple deployment. This one's obvious, but it needs to be so simple that a remote employee or a satellite office employee can set up. Integrated home policies. So frankly, if you're putting the tech in people's homes, it needs to respect their privacy. It needs to jive with their lifestyle. Next generation IoT firewall. So basically the traditional corporate firewalls don't keep up with consumer devices. They simply weren't designed to watch after, that smart thermostat. So both in fingerprinting and in security policies. So it needs to be automated and it needs to be built sort of from the onset with the smart home in mind. And finally, it needs to be auto-assisted central management, so tools for the IT to get network visibility. It needs to be the right size solution. So CFOs would have a heart attack if an IT manager proposed that they ship an SD-WAN solution to every employee home. And finally, already highlighted, but I'll highlight again, privacy management. The employee must be able to set up privacy rules. So next poll question, have you considered providing business customers centralized remote work management tools?
Okay, so looking at our results here, looks like 80% said either they're doing it, considering it, but interested. 20% totally not there, not interested. So 30% said, yes, we're doing it now. Another 30% said, yes, we're considering it. 20% said, no, not yet, but interested. And then 20%, no, but not interested. Okay.
It's a nice mix there, but you're in the right place if you're at least somewhat interested, and hopefully the not interested folks will convince by the end here. Okay, so next let's talk about HR imperatives in the hybrid working model and their relationship with IT. So over 2/3 of employees are experiencing burnout symptoms while working from home, according to Monster. People are working 8% longer workdays with 13% more meetings, and almost half of employees feel a lack of social interaction. So what does this all add up to? Essentially big business loss potential. Employees are experiencing burnout and then more likely to take extended time off, and most importantly, more likely to churn. Plus there are hits to motivation, collaboration, and innovation. So can you think of ways to improve employee stress from work from home with technology? What if, so I'll just pitch a few, what if an employer could track the work device broadband usage and average meetings all in one place to see if, that employee is, or our average workday is slipping up to 10 hours according to the broadband usage, and well, we got to do something about it. What if the employer could ship a smart office in a box that helps employees ease frustrations with connectivity and play music during lunch hours? Just another idea. So indeed, HR needs a growing technology stack. And while there's a lot of tools out there for IT and a lot of tools out there for HR, there's going to be a strong meshing that needs to happen to get the right data in the right place, and also just support HR as they adapt even more tools to get the remote worker integrated with the satellite office. And essentially, there's a lot of greenfield opportunity for these solutions to connect in new and interesting ways that perhaps your smart home products and services can. So let's just tick them off. Businesses will need to secure and support small networks. Already covered that one. Support employee wellness with new social platforms and burnout tracking. Safeguard employee privacy, a fine balance when attempting to track both burnout and productivity. Develop connected teams. So how does the business use connected devices to create better experiences, both for the people in office, that 2 to 3 days a week, and for the work from home people that they're communicating with? Businesses will need to recruit and onboard all over the globe with new platforms. They'll need to reconsider their subsidies and perks. That includes internet subsidies, office setup. Nice tidbit is that if you live in California, you may already know that California requires an internet subsidy from businesses to their employees. And with these subsidies comes managing technology solution choice and inventory from the business perspective. So a small example, in a world where people are flexibly coming into a small office or smaller office 2 to 3 days a week, who's going to close the office? Should every office get a connected security system with employee access and that can be centrally managed? And what does that look like in a smaller office setting where you're not like outfitting with a very large enterprise solution? So much more, many of which are driven by the use of connected devices and broadband. All right, so on to our final poll question. Do you see opportunities for your service to help business customers with one or more of the following goals?
So great. So looking at all of those different unique opportunities that you pulled out here, Nicole, we see a set that rose to the top. So at least 16% of respondents all selected 4 that kind of stand out. One, it secure and support small networks. So definitely, you made the case for that one for sure. Support employee wellness, safeguard employee privacy, and track productivity and burnout. The one on the lowest end with just 3% saying that they intend to help recruitment and onboarding all over the globe. So maybe a harder thing for people, maybe not as adjacent to their businesses now, but certainly folks are seeing the need to secure networks and safeguard privacy, and really your point's well taken about productivity and burnout, and really trying to understand, how employees are feeling when they're not in the office.
Awesome. Great results. And so finally, we'll just land on the business IT role, which will fundamentally change in the future of work. IT will get personal, supporting subsidies in the at-home office while respecting work-life balance. IT will partner with HR, launching physical and virtual benefits and platforms and marrying the data from these initiatives. And IT will support hybrid, which is a big management challenge on the cybersecurity and office technology front. So if you're already serving businesses, your stakeholders are likely IT decision makers. And I hope this has been a helpful exploration in future challenges and their mindset that you can help solve. And if you're not serving businesses, well, they'll be looking for smart home and smart office solutions for their smaller satellite offices. So what will you offer? And that is it. Happy to take questions. I know we're a little bit over, so let me know.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. And I know I went into your session a little bit as well. I really enjoyed a lot of the points that you pointed out. I'm like taking notes over here for follow-up questions. Since we have you returning on the panel as well, we can kind of roll into that discussion and pulling in that discussion. If you have any questions for Nicole, make sure that you get them into the Q&A tab, and we'll pull those into our panel discussion in just a little bit. So thank you very much for that presentation. We're going to go ahead and invite Elizabeth Parks to come in to host our executive Q&A with David Henry with Netgear. And so give us just a few minutes and we'll make that switch and be right back.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Capice, and I am a Strategic Account Manager for Parks Associates Executive Conferences and Custom Marketing Services. First, I want to thank our sponsors for supporting our event today. Your combined and individual support helps make our events possible. As you may know, Parks Associates is a woman-owned and trusted market research firm with an excellent reputation for our research and executive conferences. While 2020 is a year that we will certainly never forget, it remains our goal in 2021 to serve and support our sponsors through our year-long virtual conferences and custom marketing services. Our conferences offer a unique combination of industry expertise and extensive consumer research and analysis, ensuring sponsors visibility to the right audience of our senior executives throughout the year. Connections, the premier connected home conference, is celebrating its 25th year and hosting more than 1,300 senior executives from the smart home, security, connected health, energy, and home automation industries during sessions throughout the year. Our 12th annual Smart Energy Summit addresses the evolution of the customer utility market, the impact of COVID-19, and new opportunities to drive engagement in utility-sponsored programs and energy-efficient solutions. Parks Associates' 8th annual Connected Health Summit addresses opportunities for connected health solutions to empower consumers, caregivers, and providers to meet the growing demand, independent living, chronic care management, remote access, and wellness and fitness solutions. Our 4th annual Future of Video, OTT, Pay TV, and digital media brings together senior leaders to share insights on consumer adoption, churn, and spending on services, including the role of the connected CE in the growth of video viewing. If you are looking for new ways to engage with our audiences, increase your brand awareness, and network with our industry leaders, I would love to share with you on how to partner with Parks Associates to help provide your brand more visibility.
Great. So welcome back. I'm Elizabeth Parks, the president of Parks Associates, and that was great to hear from Nicole and Jennifer earlier, showing some of our stats and getting some perspective on our new environment at home and how it relates to work. I'm excited to continue this conversation and bring David Henry, Senior Vice President of Netgear, to join us on our virtual stage. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Great, and we can hear you okay.
Great.
So we're going to continue this conversation and talking about new remote work demands and the impact of technology on consumers at home, as well as the uptick in new solutions coming out from the business side. Mm-hmm. So David, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations to Netgear on some really great results coming out of your first quarter. We'll talk a little bit about where some of those results are coming from, but want to start off and talk a little bit about where we are today. So sure. As Jennifer noted, we have about half of small to medium businesses, or 15 million companies, who are reporting that they have at least some employees working remotely. And we are focused a little bit in on that SMB side just because we do have some specific data, and they make up the vast majority of businesses in the United States. So David, let's take a minute and see if you can do a quick introduction, and let's get going, jump right into the conversation and see how Netgear has been adapting since we have started with the pandemic this year.
Sure, thank you. You know, a lot of folks may know Netgear. We're largely known for our consumer products, the wireless routers and products you might find at a local retail shop, but we also have a commercial business as well. And our commercial business is focused on SMB, or small to medium-sized businesses. So we actually have a pretty unique perspective on this, because not only are we seeing, you know, the impacts on the SMB, we're seeing the impacts in the home, and we're seeing a kind of I'd say a gray area between what used to be a consumer product and what is now a commercial product, because they're becoming closer and closer together. You know, Netgear's had quite a ride in the last just over a year, and we'll go through some of that. But the pandemic certainly has driven our customers on both sides of this business to unique needs, urgent needs, and we've been doing our best to respond to those.
Well, that's great, and thanks again for joining us. Let's start off and talk a little bit about the consumer side. So tell us what you've seen in the past year with the router business and how things are going. What are some of the things that consumers are asking for as they continue to embrace technology, understand the value that it's providing?
Yeah, so they asked for a lot. I mean, I remember this when this all started. To be honest, we were all kind of in panic mode. As a consumer, we're trying to figure out how we're going to adapt. Employers, their IT departments weren't really ready for this kind of change to happen so quickly. I think we've talked about this evolution to a hybrid or a work from home and school from home and entertain from home and all these different things. These evolutions have been happening for several years and will be happening for several years. But within 3 months, we had to do 5 years of evolution in 3 months. And so from the consumer side, we started off with, how do I get work done in my dining room, right? How do I get work done in my backyard because my kids are in school in my dining room, right? And so the first thing, and if IT departments at that time were not prepared to help them because we're still getting our bearings, consumers were forced to fend it on their own, and so they went for the quick solution, the fast fix, and for our business, the first thing we saw was an uptick in our Wi-Fi range extender business. Little things you plug into the wall that boost your Wi-Fi coverage, and we saw those grow very quickly in middle of last March and throughout, because we all thought, well, how long is this going to be? I don't want to make a huge investment for something that might be just a few weeks, just a month, just a couple of months, and so the quick fix was the first fix. As things progressed, we saw that schools were not going to be out for 2 weeks; they were going to be out longer, and we started to see a growth in our mobile hotspot business. Mobile hotspots are the small battery-powered products that you use. Historically, we put them in our laptop bag when we traveled, but they became instant internet for families who didn't have internet at home. Maybe they were poor families. Maybe they're families who lived in rural areas where they didn't have good broadband, but their kids needed to be in school. Big uptick in our mobile hotspot business. So again, the quick fix, right? As things progressed, a few things happened. I think consumers started to get more educated on the different types of solutions that are out there for them to improve their home networks. I think employers, and their IT departments started to maybe help out a bit more and financially as well, maybe give subsidies. And we started to see growth in our wireless mesh systems business, which is basically a network upgrade. So it went from quick fix to we're going to be here a while. How do we upgrade our entire networks to support this new environment?
Well, and certainly our data from the consumer side also supports that, with many consumers indicating interest in increasing their broadband services to ensure that reliability, going out and purchasing the home networking equipment, Wi-Fi extenders or mesh networking. So certainly seeing that continue to play out. And then the service providers as well, really looking at advanced solutions with managed services and additional value-added services that they can offer to consumers at home. And it really does emphasize the blurring of the lines, as you and I talked earlier this week, between home and business. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these logistics around connectivity and that reliability issue. That also brings up security and privacy as well. And just the ways that consumers will be communicating, doing business at home. This certainly is something that's going to stick around. Are there new solutions that Netgear has rolled out or is planning to roll out that will help address these blurring of lines? Maybe things like the ability to prioritize business traffic over personal traffic, or to somehow limit bandwidth with specific devices on the network, maybe your kids, trying to keep their usage down. What are the things that Netgear's introduced in the past year, or maybe in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, you've actually touched on a few of them. I think the first thing is security. I think now we all have our work laptop at home, and we may not know it, but in the office, we're protected from phishing attacks and different types of cyber threats. In the home, we're not. And so Netgear's partnered with Bitdefender to introduce a cybersecurity solution for the home network that gives you a small kind of mini version of what your employer may have. So when you are on your home network with your work laptop or your work phone, but also your kids when they're in school with their Chromebook, and they start and you go to a phishing attack site, or you get an email and you click on the wrong link, or you think you're playing a game but you're not. We can block those things right there at the gateway. So anything on the network's protected. We call our Netgear Armor solution. We've definitely seen a big growth in that in the last year. I think security is going to continue to be a concern. You mentioned kids. I've got two myself. They're supposed to be in school all, virtually for, between 10 and 2 or whatever it is. But how do I know they're up playing PlayStation or on TikTok? Because I'm working. So we have a new parental control solution at Netgear that helps manage screen time for parents to make sure their kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. We have new solutions for failover. I mean, we probably never really considered this unless you run a business from home. But in the last year, we've all probably experienced at least one time where, not to beat up on the operators, but there's been at least one time where your internet service went down, even for a minute, for 2 minutes, for 30 seconds, for an hour. If your cable goes down, your DSL goes down, your fiber goes down, what do you do? Well, it can be pretty embarrassing. Obviously, it's unproductive, but we have a new set of solutions we've introduced for using LTE as a failover. So if your cable goes down, you go over to LTE, and we have those products designed for the home. So they are basically not a mobile hotspot product that you use in the home, but literally it's an LTE failover type of product. So those are the kinds of things we're starting to get traction on. You mentioned quality of service. We have quality of service we've been improving that, it used to be really more for video streaming. We want to make sure people could stream their videos and not be affected by someone downloading files. But now we've prioritized, Zoom calls and, WebEx calls and Teams calls and the like to make sure that those are preserved so that people can still be productive. So on the software and services side, there's a lot there. The last one I'll mention is around separation of traffic. I think we might talk about this, but people want to make sure that their work traffic is work traffic and their personal traffic is personal traffic, right? So kind of keeping your network separate.
Well, that's great, and certainly lots of adapting going around for the consumer at home, and also for companies like yours developing new solutions. As we move forward with expectations on the business and the consumer side to really have remote work become, I don't know about the words new normal, but there is this hybrid business model that's going to continue, especially for companies who work in the digital sense, and they have that ability to be able to work remotely and at home. If you were to be able to look out a couple of years, how dramatically do you feel like the pandemic is going to impact the solutions that Netgear is coming to market, and or that other manufacturers or service providers are delivering to the consumer?
Right. Well, I think the pandemic has taught us about ourselves, right? It's taught us that we can be productive from home. It's taught us that our employees, it's taught us that we can actually hire people that don't live in the Silicon Valley. If you have a Silicon Valley company, you can hire people wherever they are, wherever the best talent is. It means it's going to make for a more diverse workforce. I think it's also going to make for maybe allowing us to find the best talent, but also means on the flip side, the best talent can find the best job wherever that is. They're not confined, to where they want to be. So I think we've learned that. I think we've also learned that blending of our work life and our personal lives is important to keeping our employees engaged, to keeping them retained. For those who are parents, or for those who need to spend time with their families, for those with long commutes, for those who, like myself, I travel a lot. I haven't traveled in over a year, but I don't think I'm ever going to be premier exec again, right? I think we've learned quite a bit. Many of us have, aging parents, and we'd like to work. Maybe we'd like to work where our parents live for a few months to spend more time with them. So there's a lot that we've learned about ourselves that is not going to go back to the way it used to be. And I think because at least now, and I don't see why it would change, it's an employer's market. If you don't adapt to keep your employees market. If you don't adapt to keep your employees engaged the way they want to work, you're going to lose out on the best talent. So because of that, I think that this new normal, I guess we call it, of a hybrid workforce, a work from home workforce, your survey says it. Your survey might say what the companies think, and if you ask the employees of those companies, it might be even more extreme. It is that we're not going back to the way it used to be. I'm in the office today because I didn't want my internet to go down while we're having this this call. But I think that and it's not just work, right? I mean, think about all the other parts of your lives that have changed. If you used to go to the gym religiously, but then you bought a Peloton, are you going to go back to the gym? No, you're going to keep using your Peloton, right? If you've been, once you start using DoorDash and once you start using these grocery shopping, you're not going to go back to the old way. So I think that these practices have become habit, and as we look at our business, both internally on how we manage our employees, but also how our products need to evolve, we think this is the way of the future. It's just accelerated very quickly in a few months.
Yeah, it really is amazing how many things have changed and not stayed the same at all. One of the things we just started tracking this year at Parks Associates is the adoption of subscription-based fitness services. So who is paying for the Peloton service with a monthly fee? First year we've ever asked that question because frankly, people weren't doing that before, and now we've just started tracking adoption of that, and do believe that's going to continue to grow, and that services in general, subscription services, whether they're cybersecurity services, whether they're OTT services, whether home security services, are all becoming part of the norm for consumers. All of the equipment in the home, the devices, the network, the connectivity, all of this speaks to the potential need for support. And as you know, a consumer is usually reticent to get on the phone with support services because that's going to take a while. Typically, might be a painful type of thing, just trying to figure out what's not working. Is it the device? Is it the network, broadband? Is it the router? So can you share a little bit about what you all are doing in terms of support services and really creating that ease of use? The product working is critical for consumers so they don't return it. And how are you all ensuring that the products that are purchased are being used and supported easily for consumers?
Yeah, I think that starts from even product selection. I know we all have examples of walking into a Best Buy or Walmart or wherever you choose to shop for electronics. And when you look at the wall, whether it's TVs, whether it's networking products like ours, PCs, there's so much choice you don't know where to start, right? Now it's moved online, where there's even more choice. There's no end to the Amazon list of products, right? So it starts with, how do you get people to buy the right product for them? And the reason that's critical is that everyone's home's different. Some people have a modem, some people have a gateway, some people have a big house, a small house. There's so many different uniqueness about people's homes and what they need the network for, that it's really tough to put all that on a box. So we're looking at more interactive services to help our consumers find the right solution for them, for those who care about. And by the way, the purchaser may not be the one who's using it, right? It could be the employer who's purchasing and for the consumer. But we're starting with digital interaction modes where we can actually help people find the right product. Of course, there's configurators and online tools, and we're trying to oversimplify that because it can never be as simple as it should be. Once the product arrives, whether they pick it up in person or it gets sent to them, that out-of-box experience has got to be spot on. The onboarding has got to be spot on. For us, that's big investments in our mobile apps. The old days of logging into a computer and going to some web UI, and those are the days of the past. It's all about investments in our mobile apps. And when people do get stuck, how do we can give them timely support when they do get stuck? And when they get it installed and everything's great, it's great. But a few weeks later, a month later, 6 months later, if there is an interruption for whatever reason, it could be the internet provider, it could be something going on in the network, it could be, then how do you easily get them to troubleshoot that and diagnose it? So some of the tools we have on our mobile apps today let you see all the devices on your network. You see which ones have strong connections and weak connections, which ones are wired and wireless. You can pause the ones to see, is this one having a problem or not? I mean, we're trying to give our customers the self-help tools because, it's not feasible for, in the old days, you just tell your neighbor to come over and fix it. Well, maybe you don't want your neighbor in your house now during COVID, right? Your employer certainly can't send the IT manager to every employee's house to fix their IT. So these products have to stand on their own, and the apps that support them have to stand on their own.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge for the manufacturers and the service providers simply because that environment is so dependent on that individual person, and there's a lot of different factors there to address. We did have a question in from our audience though, so let me jump over here real quick. This is specific to employee privacy. So have you or are you thinking about solutions around employee privacy? So I think we addressed this a little bit earlier, but maybe you can dive a little deeper on this question.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to kind of look at this. I mean, let's start with consumer privacy, right? Whether they're an employee or not. I mean, there are solutions we're working on now, and we have VPN solutions, for example, to keep their data private and maybe hidden and tunneled away from whoever might be trying to look in on it. But I think the interesting question, which I think they're getting to, is if your employer is subsidizing your home network, right, or subsidizing your broadband, and wants to give you, here's a great new Orbi system to give you the best coverage in the home, and you make sure you're always online. Do you want your employee managing that network from remote? Sorry, your employer managing that network from remote. And I suspect there are many employees are out there who said, hey, if they're paying for it, if they're buying the product, they're paying for the broadband, have at it. But I think we also know there's a lot of people who don't want their employee having a hand in their network that might be used by their children, themselves for other reasons that are not professional. So I think there's going to be quite a few employees who are not going to allow that. And because, as I said, it's an employee's market. You can't say here's how it's going to be and that's how it's going to be. Doesn't work. I think employers are going to have to find multiple solutions. So for those who are willing to have, the IT manage their home networks, well, we're going to have a solution for that. VPN tunnels that are automatically logged in, so any device on that network is as if it was on the home. But for those who aren't willing to, and I suspect there'll be a large number, that's where we're going to have the do-it-yourself services, so employees can make their own decisions on what to protect.
Yeah, there's really a lot there to address, especially the implications with the employer subsidizing devices, the network infrastructure, the access points, and even some of the cost of the service simply because of those blurred lines. There's also a lot of implications just on the cost side for businesses. And we know from the research we've done and all the things that we've read that all businesses are really looking at new solutions to be able to serve maybe their actual location, but then also be able to reach to their employee at home. What are you all seeing with subsidies for devices or even services? I mean, is that something that you can maybe touch on? What you all seen in the past year?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen quite a few companies either offer monthly broadband subsidies or one-time per diems to equip for the home, and it's sometimes it's technology like a new monitor for the home, a new wireless router for the home broadband. Sometimes it's an ergonomic chair. Sometimes it could be anything. But we have seen that companies are willing to invest because they know that if you don't invest, you're not going to get productivity. So is there a cost to it? Absolutely. But there's cost savings when you have an empty building and you don't have to heat it all day. I mean, companies have to figure that out. But if you don't support your employees to work at home when that's just fortunately or unfortunately the way it's going to be, right? then you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how this is really, I mean, the pandemic is hitting everywhere. We do have consumers who are now responding that decisions on renting apartments, they're taking into consideration, is there an office? Is there in the apartment like a specific room that could be used for an office? Or do they have a conference room in the MDU in the apartment living area with Wi-Fi that you could leave your apartment and go work in the conference center in the apartment unit. So it's really interesting how things are going to continue to shift. And I do believe we're at the very beginning stages of all of it. It seems like it has been so drastic, and I think it has over the past year. But as we settle, I think the ramifications are going to really come for years and years, and we will be, changed consumers, we will be changed workers, and, all sorts of new solutions and technology leading the way to help us all adapt. So David, I want to give you just a moment here with some closing thoughts on the future of remote work. Anything you'd like to share before we close?
Sure. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about remote work. And it's something that we've all been kind of trying to grapple for the last year. But I think we also need to really think about the hybrid work as well, which is, many companies have already started. I know we're at Netgear, we're trying to look at when we can kind of do more hybrid. But, companies are going to be restructuring their offices physically to adapt to where they think the in-office work will be. So maybe I don't need a double-sized cube. Maybe I just need a desk, but we need a lot of video pods where you can do conference calls, little video calls from within the office. Every conference room must have really good video conferencing equipment. I mean, you think about, for us, the old days, you go into a conference room and you spend the first 5 minutes trying to figure out how the video thing worked. Is it muted? Is it loud? And all these different things. That can't happen. That has to be solved. We'd have 10 people in a room and 3 people on the phone, and the 3 people on the phone couldn't hear the people in the room, and they couldn't see the whiteboard. And that the hybrid is actually going to be even more challenging in some cases than the work from home, because we got to make it work. So I think there's a huge opportunity, of course, for companies who do it well to really take advantage of that. For companies like us, where we have the infrastructure to support the video pods and the video conferencing and everything in the home, but also bridging it to the home as well as in the office. So that's the next page, which we're going to be turning over imminently, and we're pretty excited about it.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, David, for joining us today. Really great insights, and lots that we'll continue to talk about as we move forward. It is the name of the game here is being able to adapt, survival of the fittest. So thank you again for your time, and we will be back here in just a moment for our interactive panel discussion. So hold on with me for just 2 minutes, and we'll see you back here for that next discussion. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Tuya Smart is a leading global IoT cloud platform that connects the intelligent needs of brands, OEMs, developers, and retail chains. The platform provides developers with a one-stop IoT PaaS-level solution that contains hardware development tools, global cloud services, and smart business platform development, offering comprehensive ecosystem empowerment from technology to marketing channels to build the world's leading IoT cloud platform. The scope of Tuya's business covers the whole chain from smart manufacturing to the application of smart scenes. At the same time, encouraged by the online and offline channel resources of the service providers, integrators, and operators in Tuya's ecosystem, Tuya can help our brand customers to sell smart devices to the entire world. Tuya collaborates closely with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Samsung. Our platform is one of the first that integrates Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and Samsung SmartThings at the same time. We enable brands to solve product development problems such as high development costs, long development cycles, and technical challenges and roadblocks, so that even companies with zero experience can quickly enter into the IoT space and enhance their product competitiveness. Tuya Smart is a leading global IoT cloud platform based on the underlying IoT PaaS-level technical support. We have developed smart business solutions for various industries, including smart home builders, hotels, security, community, apartment, and commercial lighting. The infrastructure behind our platform includes Cloud Plus networking module plus app to enable the rapid development of smart products. We introduced the Power by Tuya labeled PBT to demonstrate the interconnection of products built on our platform. Products bearing the PBT label can be easily controlled by the same app, regardless of brand or category. The Powered by Tuya solution is elegantly simple for brands to interconnect. By the end of December 31st, 2020, the Tuya IoT development platform has served over 262,000 developers around the world, with over 122 million daily AI voice interactions. The platform receives 84 billion device requests daily. Tuya had smart-enabled more than 252,000 devices SKUs, and now the devices are available in more than 220 countries and regions, covering over 100,000 sales channels all over the world.
Okay, great. We're back and ready to dive in with our full panel of experts. What a great conversation with Netgear. Really interesting to hear their perspective. So what I'd love to do is invite our industry speakers in. And I'd like to ask you each to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your company before we get going. So I'd love to start with Peter Butler, who's the Senior Program Manager at Everise. Hi, Peter.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So yes, just to let you guys know a little bit about the company, Everise is among the largest work-at-home customer service platforms in the world, with the highest employee satisfaction score. We offer next-generation home-based solutions with high-performing and productive remote culture, strategic outsourcing from 7 markets, a secure and scalable infrastructure, and more things that we'll be talking about during the panel today. But my role at the company is Senior Program Manager with a focus on systematic insights. My teams work with the largest companies in the world to help them prevent problems before they happen. So the systematic insights methodology is currently used in product beta testing and support, customer service improvement, quality assurance, and many other areas to improve the experience for the consumers as well as the employees who support them. So again, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on this panel today.
Great, thanks, Peter. Very excited to hear how the companies that you serve, right, have really dealt with this drastic shift to distributed work. Next, we have Keith Davis, who's Executive Director, Product Development and Management with Cox Communities. Hi, Keith. Keith, I think we're not hearing you. Can you?
That was the double fail-safe mute. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah,
So,
well, it worked, but now we can hear you great.
Great. So yeah, I'm here representing Cox Communications today. As many of you may know, Cox is among one of the largest cable providers in the United States. I think we're technically third largest. We serve well over 6 million customer relationships. Generate north of 12 billion revenue in the cable business alone. Other companies under the Cox umbrella include Auto Trader, Cox Automotive, several other brands that you're familiar with, for a total of roughly 20 billion in revenue. And I'm here, or should I say, I'm responsible for internet, voice services, automation services at Cox. So looking forward to talking about those things today.
Great, wonderful, Keith. Thanks so much for being here. And next, we have Scott Lever, who's the founder and CEO at Zobi. Hi, Scott. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Hi. Thanks, Jennifer. As you said, my name's Scott Lever. I'm the founder of a British tech startup called Zobi. We're building a platform that makes it easier for smart home owners to manage their privacy and digital exposure. We've been going just under 2 years. We've recently closed a seed funding round January this year. We mostly work with service providers and device manufacturers, but also have our own hardware. Personally, I've been in the technology and cybersecurity industry for just over 25 years across multiple sectors, and excited to be here.
Great, very excited to hear what you guys have been working on in this past year and the impacts on the market that you've seen from remote work. And finally, I'd love to invite Nicole back in. Nicole, founder and CMO of Minim. So thanks so much for jumping onto our panel to join this full discussion as well. And for those perhaps who have joined a little late and maybe missed your talk earlier, Nicole, I'd love to have you just sort of reintroduce yourself and Minim quickly.
Sure. So Chief Marketing Officer at Minim. We make software-driven internet access products under the globally recognized Motorola brand and also the Zoom trademark. And we also serve over 130 ISPs and businesses with AI-driven Wi-Fi management and security solutions.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'd love to start off our conversation. Actually, before I do that, I do want to remind everybody who's listening that we are happy to take your questions in the panel today. So there's a Q&A tab and a chat tab. You can put your questions into either of those. Our teams are watching that. So feel free. It's an interactive sort of experience, so very happy to take your questions. So again, I'd love to start with kind of taking the big picture question to the panel. We've all seen the shift to remote work, of course, by necessity over the past year, and really understanding how what this remote work has meant to the companies that you serve or to consumers as end users. From your perspective, really love to start with Keith there.
Sure. So you did say Keith, correct, Jennifer? I want to make sure.
I sure did. I sure did.
So, from the ISP perspective, what we saw in the course of just a few weeks was 36 months of usage growth. It was quite dramatic. So placed an incredible short-term strain on the network and on technical as well as human resources to really make sure that our customers had the experience they needed to have at a time when they needed the internet really more than ever. Happy to say that Cox really doubled down on investment, on network monitoring, so on and so forth, and really came through with flying colors. We did see an enormous amount of upshift in sort of tier leveling up, moving from lower speed internet products to higher speed. I heard another panelist in an earlier discussion talking about consumers adopting pods and extenders. That was a significant factor in our business, as well as consumers buying extra lines of service. So just been an enormous, really sea change in how consumers and businesses consume the internet and really provision themselves for success.
Mm-hmm. Our data actually certainly supports exactly what you're saying, right? More people kind of tiering up, but also maybe thinking differently about their service provider. So we saw NPS scores rise. We asked some sentiment questions related to how you think specifically your ISP performed, during this time, and relatively positive. not speaking about Cox specifically, but in general,
Yeah.
ISP NPS scores and customer satisfaction tend to be low compared to other markets. So really, do you think that this has changed how your customers think about you and your service?
That was one of the really pleasant surprises, and it would not have been something I predicted, right? But I think people realized, perhaps in a way that they hadn't before, how incredibly reliant they are on the service that we're all providing, this ecosystem. And so, yes, you're right. We did see NPS scores as a whole rise, and I think I appreciate that. I appreciate the sentiment from our customers. But there's still more to do. We're not done. I don't think we'll ever be done. But our entire goal is to continue to raise those NPS scores and deliver a better and better product and service for our customers.
Great. So same question to you, Scott, from kind of where you sit in the ecosystem, and you bring a nice global perspective too, being based in the UK, how work from home has really impacted consumers at home and businesses and employers.
So I think, interestingly, we saw a mad dash for solutions. So when lockdown was first announced, everyone was out there trying to buy laptops. Laptop supply, certainly in the UK, sold out within about 48 hours. I heard about 1,500 reconditioned laptops that were effectively being auctioned off to corporates. People going out, deploying Zoom, Teams, looking at cybersecurity posture. The whole kind of, I guess the whole country went a bit crazy for trying to find solutions, working out who could work from home, how they can work from home securely. How do we look at things like PCI compliance for card payments, multi-dwelling units? And also, I think the tricky thing for us is, 90% of people can work from home in a suitable way, but there's still that 10% that have specialist requirements or security constraints, and that was the challenge for us in the early days.
So can you share at all a little bit about how you dealt with that 10%, right? If your solution was touching them at all or serving them, what were they really looking for, and what sort of support do they need?
Yeah, so I think that 10% is just the extra mile. So, people that aren't necessarily technically savvy, that need the extra support, extra time on the call, people that don't know how to configure home working devices or broadbands or VPNs or any of these kind of technologies. It's really very much a one-on-one, almost like a VIP service, where they get a call or a FaceTime call and actually talk through the solution and how to fix things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Elizabeth had a great conversation on that a little bit just prior to this, about there's a real opportunity for premium technical support for people who need that extra hand-holding, but also, of course, you're in this, at least for this past year, we've been in a situation where it's not that you can have people into the home to support, it's all remote support and connected support. So, let me turn to Nicole. So we heard a little bit about your thoughts already on, some of the challenges that companies have experienced with dispersed workforces. Maybe you can talk a little bit more, focus on a few that you think really risen to the top, and really how companies are addressing some of those key challenges that work from home poses.
Sure. Yeah. So I started out on my talk with the 4 key challenges that businesses with dispersed workforces have: corporate security, productivity, employee satisfaction, and resource management. Let me dive into the security front and take the elephant in the room, which is network security, which we've already done a bit of primer there, but I have a few specific examples here. So the FBI recently reported that the number of complaints about cyber attacks to the cyber division is up by as many as 4,000 a day, which is a 400% increase since the pandemic. And in the wake of the pandemic, from our vantage point at Minim, we saw industry IT departments take the weighted out approach, no coordinated efforts to tackle the exploded corporate network, and kind of just leaving it up to the remote employee. And certainly on the B2C side of our house, where we support consumers directly through retail, they were immediately looking for upgrades to their home network, and then also starting to get more educated themselves about security and asking questions there. So some industries, however, healthcare and banks, for example, they had to take responsibility because their data is just so sensitive. So they looked for existing enterprise security solutions and experienced night terrors about the cost that it would be to bring the enterprise security into every home. So Minim launched Minim for Work. We were already supporting smart homes with our Wi-Fi management platform, and we looked to secure employees, but also bring employers into that conversation. And then we were really happy to find that not only were companies interested in securing the smart home, but also the smart office and having a combination of both on the same account and platform. So we recently announced a great customer, Any Lab Test Now, who uses Minim to secure and manage its Wi-Fi at its retail lab test sites, which are in high demand. As an example, our cloud platform blocks TrickBot and Bazaar Loader, which are two malware strains that work in conjunction and are a common threat to healthcare facilities and remote workers who are in the healthcare industry. And there has actually been a spike in the healthcare industry of 45% since November. So with a Minim security filter turned on, long story short, Any Lab Test Now with the cost of about $50 a month can actually secure their lab site from that particular malware and a bunch others. Similarly, we block the Emotet malware strain for banking, and the list goes on. So in addition, we tackled the ability for customers to easily turn off their connectivity to listening devices during conference calls and things like that. So I would say that has definitely been, cybersecurity has been an interesting challenge that we've tackled during the dispersed workforce movement.
Yeah, that's interesting. If I could ask a quick follow-up on that. So, we think about the connected devices in the home, right? We hear, high profile in the news hacks of certain smart home devices, but overall, because adoption is still relatively low of any individual device type, there's a little bit of security by obscurity, right? And most people are focused on other major enterprises or other places to attack. Do you feel like, or do you see with work shifting into the home that connected home devices become a much more attractive attack vector, right? That it would make more sense, for there to be actually more vulnerabilities and more focus on hacking connected home devices to get into the enterprises through this kind of open back door?
Yeah, I mean, Avast found in 2019 pre-pandemic that 41% of smart homes had at least one vulnerable device in the home. And certainly, I think the smart home has been a growing attack vector. We've seen 600% year-over-year growth in some places on attacks to the smart home. And the pandemic has definitely just been a heyday, so much so that the US government, when the pandemic hit, put out an alert to consumers to say, you're working from home now, and this presents consumers and their employers about the new risks that come to the business. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let me bring Peter into the conversation as well. I would love to hear from Everrise's perspective again. You, as you mentioned, have major global companies that you're serving in their shift to distributed workforce. So can you speak at all to what you're seeing and kind of the impacts of this new work reality?
Certainly, and I can say that at Everrise we've had a successful work from home model for some time. So this is not a new thing that we've had to address, but scaling it to 100% of our workforce being at home was definitely no small task. So adding to that challenge, some of our clients that we work with have never even considered a work from home option because they have such high need for security, privacy, compliance. We work with big companies, including healthcare, where that member security, that privacy is paramount. And so when employees work in an office building, you can observe their behavior and enforce a clean desk policy, meaning no mobile phones or anything like that in the workspace. So how do you translate that same level of security to an employee's home? And Nicole spoke about some of that. We've taken similar measures here. We have solutions to address basically every level of security that our clients require. So depending on the nature of the work, we'll use a combination of protocols to ensure that all privacy and security standards are followed, including endpoint data security and privacy controls with remote desktop monitoring, mobile device and application management, non-persistent virtual machines with smart access security, two-factor authentication with facial recognition, and physical environment monitoring. And if these measures aren't enough for a particular client, we still have the ability to bring our workforce into one of our secure office locations as needed. So our offices are regularly checked for CDC compliance to make sure that we are socially distancing, that we're following all the health safety protocols to the letter.
When you talked about the physical environment monitoring, are you talking about even into the employee's home, and what does that sort of monitoring mean? Tell us a little bit about what they're watching for.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all used to the idea that, if you're on a company-owned system, anything you do on your screen can be monitored at any time. But with the environment monitoring, much like when you're in an office building and there may be security cameras and things, we have the ability to put that in our employees' homes as well. And of course, there's an agreement that is signed. We make sure that everything is done the correct way. As Keith mentioned earlier, there are some employees who may not opt into that. Or I'm sorry, it wasn't Keith, it was the speaker before that. But that is a reality. So in some cases, we've had to find new positions for certain employees that didn't want to invite that into their home. But for those who are willing, we are very careful to make sure that we are very respectful of our employees' privacy, never utilizing that when they're off the clock. But for the security of our clients, it is very important that they make sure that we can monitor those employees to ensure that nothing is happening that's not above board.
Sure. And I can imagine, obviously, this varies by industry, and you may have defense and intelligence and healthcare where, that need for next level security is high. There's a example I can add here from a healthcare provider I spoke with kind of early in the pandemic, and they were trying to ramp up telehealth, right? And their providers were using some of the telehealth platforms for the first time and trying to, the platform's HIPAA compliant, but the providers at home conducting a patient consultation with their kids at the table, and it's like, well, that's not HIPAA compliant. They can hear what you're talking about with this patient in the room, right? And so that idea of, well, what's happening in the rest of the physical space is really interesting to speak to. Can you then talk at all about maybe, did Everise change anything about your solutions or your services over the past year? New features that were suddenly in demand, adapting to kind of what was needed from you?
Sure. Well, like I said, scaling to 100% work from home model was a very large undertaking. And so that meant that not only from the company side of things, where we had to kind of scale up the infrastructure that we have, we also had to get new equipment out to all of our employees. So just as we heard a moment ago in the UK, there was a huge rush for laptops, and that was happening here as well. Everyone had a need for devices that they could use in their home to continue the type of work that they were doing in the office. And so thankfully, with our global footprint, much of that was already at our fingertips, but we did update a lot of that and give new equipment to our employees in their homes. The idea being that this work from home is going to continue to be a much larger thing than it was in the past. And so we want to invest in that heavily and make sure that even if we do go back to a hybrid model going forward, that we have everything we need in our homes to support those clients. Not only that, but it's a great fallback sort of safety measure so that if anything goes down, if the power goes out in the office, we can quickly tap into those resources who are at their home. They can log in and continue that work to minimize that downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back to you, Nicole, actually, same question. So how did Minim change its solutions or services? Were there different features that that you brought to market over the past year to kind of change, again, serve remote work, change what you're doing for either business or consumer and clients?
Sure. So I already mentioned our launch of Minim for Work, which allows the employer to deliver a managed router essentially to the employee, and also give that employee an easy-to-use app just to manage their network, and then also gain insights through our web app, which is the same web app that powers our ISP product. So it creates a co-managed network environment. But one of the very initial things that was just mentioned that we had to contend with was then privacy. So we were in the business of providing managed Wi-Fi solutions to ISPs. ISPs are typically expected to manage and know things like what's going over their network and what's connecting up to their network. So they typically have insight into the connected devices using a Wi-Fi management platform such as ours. But now when you talk about opening that same window up for the IT department, it feels a little weird, right, for your IT department to know that your kid is gaming 8 hours a day or whatever. So one of the first things we did was launch a work-life Wi-Fi feature, which allows the employee to create an SSID for work and an SSID for personal use, and then selectively hide that SSID. And essentially, of course, everyone will know, well, if you do need to troubleshoot remotely a network, you kind of need to see all SSIDs. So that's why we made it optional for the employee to share when they need help. And so that was just one way that we changed our service. The other highlight that I'd like to mention is we talked about how ISPs, which is another customer we serve, how they adapted to the pandemic in the light of increased broadband utilization, increased need for network upgrades and equipment upgrades. Well, one of the things that we did there was we realized that as consumers were experiencing the need for these network upgrades, they were also getting antsy about, what do I need and how much data do I actually use and where is my data being used? And they, in some cases, they didn't like the answer of, hey, you need to upgrade your service because you're hitting your max now with all this Zoom video calling and remote learning. So we launched a feature set that helps the consumer better understand where their data usage is going by device, by profile, by website. And then that way it's a much smoother conversation with the ISP, and the ISP was, our ISP customers were pretty grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that raising consumer education and awareness of what's going on in their home, right, you need to make for a much more sophisticated customer, for sure. Well, one great point on the last conversation is that, we were talking a lot about remote from home, but remote work from home. But the reality is that, there are folks returning to the office, and the full-time, remote, all the time, everybody position that we've been for the last year is not necessarily the future, right? We have a polling question here that I'd love to read out that essentially tested the audience's feel about, specifically what model they think is going to happen over the next year. If we could pull up those polling results. Yeah, so what are your expectations for remote work in 2022 and beyond? And the majority of audience members felt like hybrid workplaces will become more common than full-time remote roles, though 27% did feel like remote work will be the dominant model going forward. So I'm interested to understand how you see this year and next year being different than last year, right? So if last year was the year of full-time, everybody at home who could be, and, are we moving into this having to support some people in the office, some people not? What does that look like? What new challenges does that bring? So Scott, Scott would love to bring you in for, your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So, yeah, interesting ones. All the research that I've read says that this year, next year, the year after, we're going to have around about 20 to 30% of the workforce at home, with everyone else back in the office. But in reality, what we're seeing is it's the other way around. We're seeing 30 to 40% returning to work and 60% working from home. And I think that's going to be the new normal, to be honest with you. I think that there are issues with that. There's Zoom fatigue. There's too much chat, too many long hours, all the stuff that we really talked about a little bit. But yeah, absolutely. I think large corporates we see are reducing their office footprint, making collaborative spaces, meeting rooms, putting in UAV equipment, and everything's focused around the collaboration and remote working for sure.
And so can you talk about how you think about that at Zobi, right? So what that means for the opportunity for you, does having some people in the office and some people at home change at all the features that people are going to need, or, where they're going to expect to get your solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, we're a cybersecurity device for the consumer. One of our main things we're doing is because one of our kind of key use cases, I guess, is home workers, remote workers. So actually, the increase in remote workers is great for us. We're getting a lot of pre-orders for our new hardware. We're looking at building in capabilities to improve the experience, the Wi-Fi experience for home workers. So things like packet shaping and traffic prioritization. So I think, as terrible as it sounds, COVID's a great thing for us in terms of market demand, because companies, and actually what we're finding now is, as well as consumers ordering our hardware, we've got companies saying, actually, we're going to include it in the onboarding kits. When a new starter comes along, they get a laptop, a smartphone, and one of our physical devices as well. So it's part of it. Companies are starting to think about home security or smart home security rather than just functionality, for sure.
Are you seeing any demand from any particular sectors? I love the idea of that provisioning kit, right? Onboarding new employees from the get-go.
Yeah, I think it's mostly regulated environments. So insurance, banking, also just for general corporates. So any high value targets. So anyone with access to banking or HR or sensitive data, they're the ones that, C-suite, those kind of people, they're kind of the real hot customers, I guess.
Yep. Well, Peter, back to you. You mentioned you guys have been doing remote work for a long time. You kind of get work from home. How about the hybrid? David Henry from Netgear mentioned this idea of, you've got people in the conference room and people on the phone and people zooming in, and, you're going to have to support people in very different ways. So can you talk at all about how either that challenge is different or what maybe new solutions need to be brought to support people?
Well, it's an interesting question, because the teams that I manage, what we found is that the hybrid model has been working for us for a long time, way before the pandemic. And it started out of a necessity because, as I mentioned, one of the things that we do is we beta test products. And so for some of those products, they are smart home products. You need to be using them in your home. And so what we did is we scheduled everyone to have 1 or 2 work from home days a week, and made them all the same, either Thursday or Friday or both. That way, Monday through Wednesday, everyone was in the office together. We had the ability to collaborate, do team building, all the things that we need to do as a team. But then we had 1 or 2 days a week where we were working from home, where we could test those products. We could try to recreate some behaviors that may or may not be expected. And what I found personally for myself is that those work from home days, I could be way more efficient than I normally could be in the office, because I had no distractions. I had no one coming up and walking up and needing my opinion on something. Now that we've switched to a fully working from home model, I've found that efficiency has kind of decreased, because I'm not the only one at home. My kids are at home, and as a parent, if I hear my kids going at each other's throats in the next room, and they know that I'm right there and I can hear what's going on, and I don't address it, I feel like a bad parent. And so it takes me away from my work for a moment so I can go deal with that. I then have to get back into the zone of working. And so I do think that as we go forward, going back to a hybrid model, once our kids are back in school and all these things, is really what we've found is kind of that winning formula. 1 or 2 days a week at home, the rest of the time collaborating in the office.
Yeah, that sounds like the Google model that I talked to earlier, trying to find a sweet spot there. Well, let me bring in the results of our other polls. So we asked the audience members, if we think about the role for ISPs in particular, since we have several ISPs specifically, and then service solutions serving ISPs. You know, this idea that there are new services to put forward for supporting folks who are working from home, whether that be next tier internet or second home lines for broadband for remote work, or employer subsidization programs for those lines at work. And we asked which initiative from ISPs is most likely to gain traction here in 2021. Second home broadband lines for remote work, employer subsidization programs for home broadband, premium cybersecurity services for the home, and premium technical support for remote employees. And it's a little bit spread across the board. A third selected second home broadband lines for remote work and the premium cybersecurity services. Third place for premium technical support. And then finally, only 13% feel like employer subsidization programs for home broadband is really going to gain traction. So Keith, as the resident ISP on the panel, would love to get your thoughts on what you think are the best opportunities for ISPs specifically to serve remote workers in the home sphere.
Sure. Well, you know, I think your participants were they're all correct. Those are all significant opportunities, most of which we're either doing or looking at doing. So, you know, I think Nicole mentioned, I'll just start with this, you know, sort of the advanced monitoring and, you know, sort of security capabilities made possible through really intelligent endpoint devices, the modems, the gateways. And of course, that's a significant part of our offering. You know, our panoramic Wi-Fi product, which includes whole home Wi-Fi, includes, you know, gateway-based, network-based security. So that's first and foremost. And I would say that's the foundation level of security. But we are offering already, or considering offering, I should say, further enhanced security, premium support, that sort of thing. So that is something we're looking at, you know, in 22. Today, we do offer advanced technical support as a premium subscription service. We have offered second line internet service for years, frankly. People really, it was very rare when it was sold. We saw a 300% uptick in second line internet service as a result of you know, sort of the lockdown. And then finally, the employer subsidization. That phenomena does exist, although as your voters indicated, it is rare. So we had a handful of employers who wanted us to develop programs whereby, you know, we could subsidize or apply discounts, if you will, against their employees' accounts, and we did. It's not been so large that we have formalized a process for that. So I'm a little bit skeptical on that one becoming a bigger deal than it is today, only because the winds seem to be blowing in a direction where, you know, many of us will be getting back to the office, at least in, you know, some form or fashion.
Yeah, I'm interested about that 300% uptick in the second home broadband lines. You know, we've been talking here internally when we think about sizing the market for broadband subscriptions and forecasting that growth. Second lines have been really negligible in what we even consider as, you know, subscription lines, and we're like, wow, we've got to really revisit our assumptions here, because this could be a very substantial point of growth for the market. Are you seeing that, or do you think it's a temporary blip?
No, I think your initial assumptions were right. I mean, so we started with a relatively negligible number, so it's fairly easy to get, you know, exponential growth out of that. We'll see if it continues. Ideally, you know, a homeowner, or I should say a consumer, shouldn't need two lines of internet service for the sake of quality, right? That's, you know, we should be able to deliver one line and you have all the quality, all the bandwidth you need. I think it's more a matter of, you know, keeping business to business and keeping home and personal to home and personal. So I do think there is a convenience play, right? In terms of offering the two products. And I think that's the one that we have to probe a little bit more to see if there is in fact a there. I think in many cases this year, people were buying incremental lines just as they were tiering up with faster internets. The idea was, oh, I know what'll fix it. Let me get another line of service. So jury is still out on that. We're still exploring. I think we'll figure out, our answers this year and into next year.
Yeah. Jennifer, can I play devil's advocate on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think it's just early. So businesses are just figuring out their hub and spoke models. They're just figuring out how to get out of their leases. I think someone had mentioned to me today that they have a year and a half left and they're already working on a whole plan. So as remote working becomes, I think, a little bit more permanent, that's when the budgets start to shift from the office to the homes for the remote workers. And I think what's speeding it up is really the talent expecting it and the global marketplace for talent creating more competition. So now that's going to be, a place of competition for businesses. But one other driver that's really real, especially in the lives of our tier 3 ISP customers, is these challenger ISPs that are coming in with 5G. So if you look at Starlink coming in, they have every opportunity to say, hey, employer, create a program with us to offer a second line of connectivity. And by the way, we're going to provide you all this extreme tracking so that you can experience one distributed network. So I think, the traditional ISPs, incumbent ISPs, sorry, Keith, but we'll have to figure out how to compete when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And it's interesting also to think through different models of, do you need additional lines? Or as you talked to earlier too, Nicole, can you just separate the traffic? Do what needs to be done. But it is interesting because there's several different components here. It's service quality. So do you need the second line because you're having service issues, and then the ISP can maybe address that? Or is it, privacy and security of that data going, for business purposes? So a lot of different kind of pushes and pulls, and maybe as companies do get out of their leases, that really opens up a new pool of funds to direct to home technology products and services. Well, so I don't want to skim over some of these privacy issues, and a couple of you have brought it up kind of specifically. Let's take it from the employees kind of point of view. Scott, I'd love to come back to you here about what you're seeing or what your thoughts are on employee acceptability, of solutions. You're talking about a kit that's provisioned home to them, where that trust between employer and employee is, and maybe what features consumers need to have to feel that their privacy is protected in the home.
Yeah, so I think it's quite interesting actually, because there's that fine line between when employees thinks an employer is spying on them and not, and you get it whether you're in the workspace or remote working. People at work are always worried that the emails being read or screen time being recorded, phone calls, etc. I think now obviously that's extending into the home. I think people are worried about other areas. They're worried about, can my employer see my personal browsing history? Can they see what device is got on the network? And I think really the only way around that is by this kind of transparency, so the consumer and the employee being able to see what the employer can see. And it's a really hard thing to do because obviously there's computer use policies and so on. But I guess our devices and our apps and our service providers to be able to say, this is your work bubble, your mobile device management kind of thing, and this is your home bubble, and there's a separation there, and kind of giving that education to the consumers and the employees. I think it's a really hard one. It's more around the education and the technology, because I think people do naturally worry they're being spied on. Definitely.
Yeah, certainly. I wonder if expectations will be different at all in different markets. I think there's a lot more sensitivity and certainly stricter regulations around privacy of consumer data in Europe with GDPR versus in most of the US. So California is a little bit stricter. I don't know how much that really comes into play to the employer-employee relationship. It's mostly been more businesses that are capturing your data, through other services and advertising, et cetera. But I don't know if you've all thought through that at all.
So one thing we did see actually is really interesting is we had a lot of companies, obviously people sending their employees to work from home, there was quite a high percentage, much higher than I expected, that actually said, hold on a minute, I'm not going to use my personal device for work. I refuse to do it, whether it's because I don't have one or worried about privacy. So they turned around to the company and said, if you can't provide me with the technology and the kit, I want time off paid. And because of the kit shortages, it meant that a lot of the staff almost kind of sat on the bench doing nothing, still got paid for it, because they refused to kind of use their personal devices because they're worried about the privacy, which is really interesting.
That really is interesting. Yeah, I think that speaks to a little bit of what David was saying from NetCare about, it's the employees market, right? And maybe even more so the power shifting that way, given, again, that people can, attract talent kind of from anywhere. And they can work from anywhere. Well, Peter, let me jump over to you to see if you have any additional thoughts on this privacy conversation from home. I mean, again, David's perspective was, really, if you're going to ask too much from them, employees will just go elsewhere. And you're saying, hey, for certain industries, you're in or you're out. You can't work for us unless, unless you abide by these rules. And can you expand on that any further?
Well, sure. And, this idea of your employer having access to your personal device is also not new. I can say that, I have worked for Apple. I've done contract work for Google. These big companies, when you install, their profile on your mobile device, for example, you just want to be able to get your work email on your phone. You have to agree that they basically have remote access to wipe out that data and potentially other data on your phone. Now, I personally have opted just not to do that. And that was okay with those companies. For my position, they were able to say, like, okay, as long as you're getting your email on your wherever you need it, on your work computer, your whatever it is that you do your work from, you are not required to have this on your phone. The reality today is that, with people working from home and being in a home environment, it's a little bit more difficult to decline that if you're going to be working in a remote location. And so we do have to have kind of some mutual trust. We need to trust our employees to not be, abusing the data that they have access to. And the employees need to trust their employer as well. You need to make sure that you're really building that relationship so that that trust exists. Because if I don't have faith in my employer to avoid abusing that access that they have into my life, then I'm not ever going to agree to that. Now, as I mentioned, Everrise has a very, very high employee satisfaction score, and that's no accident. We work very hard to make sure that that trust is maintained, doing exactly what Scott said, making sure that we are communicating exactly what we're capturing, exactly why we are capturing it, and if there is not a need at any given time, we're not going to do it just because we have the ability to.
Yep. Well, let me remind the audience that I'm going to come to questions in just a minute. I see at least one coming in here. And so if you have questions for the panel, please submit them now. But one last question before we jump over to our attendee questions. So one thing I'm sort of guilty of is sometimes thinking, when I think about products and services for the home, I have this natural single family home owner perspective. It's just, I happen to live in a single family home. And so I think about this. Let's talk about MDU and the MDU environment, the multifamily residence environment. Are their needs, right, for remote work different? Do you serve them differently? For residents that may get bulk internet provided by their property as opposed to, talking to the ISP directly, really interesting implications, I think, for multifamily. So let's go to Scott and then Keith for that question, and then we'll jump over to questions. So Scott, anything that you're seeing from your customers depending on kind of their property type?
Yes, this is quite an interesting one. So it's MDU, apartments, shared homes, that kind of thing. There's, because of the way it is, you want to maintain your privacy online and offline, and there's definitely a need to kind of protect your own bubble. So much like mobile device management, talking about creating bubbles of data on devices. We're seeing people wanting to create almost like a bubble, whether that be a different SSID or a kind of firewalled off area, whatever it is, they want to kind of protect their privacy from other people in that MTU. I think it's quite a challenging environment when you've got shared services and shared backbones. If you think about things like bandwidth control and fair usage, and even things like in MDUs and apartment blocks, where you have smart meters in every condo or apartment, all of a shared network infrastructure, it doesn't take a genius to work out you can connect to the Ethernet on there and get into any smart meter on that home and go from there. So I think there's definitely a demand for a solution there, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's interesting as well. Keith, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll add a couple points. One is I do agree with everything Scott said. The consumer in the MDU, the resident, I don't think they're consuming in a fundamentally different way. But you pointed out, Jennifer, it's really how you serve them and the unique characteristics of living in that environment. One of the things that we'll do, for example, Scott sort of talked about the smart devices. We'll actually run a dedicated separate network to a property for the smart devices. So they live on their own dedicated private network, and then the resident has a different network available to them. So it's a way of keeping those two parts distinct and adding in a layer of security. There's also other ways to serve a property in the form of you mentioned bulking. So are you providing gateways, modems to each unit? Are you doing managed Wi-Fi where you're relying more on APs, et cetera, throughout common areas? So really, it's about developing the right solution for the property, and of course, the property operator has a lot to say about what that solution is, depending on their points of view around is internet an amenity that they're trying to bundle in with their monthly rents, or is it just an enabling technology? And they want the best technology they can get, which typically means they're allowing Cox or another ISP to serve the consumers or the residents as independent consumers.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think through from the property manager's perspective. The supporting your residents and being able to work, let's say, from a courtyard and print back your unit, or out by the pool, or in a common office space, right? And whether or not we're going to see a lot more demand for these types of connected services and property-wide Wi-Fi, right?
We definitely are. That's a really burgeoning area is community Wi-Fi blanket ubiquitous coverage. So we see that trend continuing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Well, one question I wanted to get to, David touched on this a bit. I'm interested to hear from the panel about the challenges created by multiple users in the home. So not just an employee, but also a child distance learning and a spouse working for a different company, right? So now we're really complicating, network use and what traffic belongs where. Nicole, maybe do you want to take a shot at that one?
Sure. So the first obvious one is network contention. So if an employee doing a Zoom call is then contending with a child doing remote working and another child doing gaming and the other spouse also on a work call, then you get a real bandwidth hungry home, and they're all fighting for throughput over the Wi-Fi. So that's probably the first break, is just plain old strong connectivity and throughput. But then, let's see, after that, I'll lean on security again because it's just so interesting. If you have a smart device that is able to talk with another device on the network, so think about how you do some streaming from your smartphone to your Chromecast. If one of those is compromised and then able to talk with a sensitive device, you've got problems. You have problems because now that infected device can infect another device. And so I think it's really just the more devices on the network, the more network contention, the more opportunity for security threats. And that's what we're seeing most consumers contend with.
Yeah. Keith, do you have any thoughts on this one as well?
Yeah. Once again, agree with Nicole's comments. Great panel we have. I would say one of the other things that we're doing, and I suspect Minimum is doing it as well, So we have user apportioned credentials. So, on one of our devices, for example, we could assign different user IDs, and then we can, designate how much bandwidth or how much, aggregate usage that user is allowed to consume. The challenge that I have found with that is it really does require a lot of involvement from the user and typically the head of household. And there's a lot of inertia between, a great idea such as the one I described and them actually doing it. So then I fall back and I say, well, then that's the ISP's fault if we're not providing a robust enough experience in the home so that contention is never really an issue in the first place. So that I feel like that needs to be our objective, is to alleviate the congestion, the contention before it ever happens. Still think those are great products, and I encourage families to take advantage of them. But ideally, I don't want contention in that house in the first place.
Yeah, certainly. So we have one final question. We're almost at time, but this will be our last question. And Peter, I'm going to go to you for this about, do you see a future where an employee or every employee might just be given a mobile hotspot to work off of and thus not have to rely on their own network? And how would businesses bear the burden of the costs associated with those kinds of scenarios?
That's a great question. I can, of course, imagine a scenario in which that could be a future. I don't see that being an immediate future, as people are going back into the office and things like that. We'll kind of have to see where that goes, but it's definitely an interesting prospect.
Okay, great. Well, I'd love to thank all of our panelists for your time and your insights today. I really enjoyed hearing from each of you. I'd like to invite you all, and as well as our attendees, if you can, to jump on over to the networking discussion in just a minute here. Thank you all again for your insights. So just want to remind everybody that we have our next virtual sessions are coming up just here at the end of May. This has always been our time, our flagship Connections event that when we're in person is always hosted in San Francisco that week right before Connections. So we're going to keep that kind of feel going and have 2 full days of sessions at the end of May, May 25th and 26th. So hope to have you all back and join us there. Thank you again to our sponsors, as well as to our media and industry association supporters. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Parks Associates research, we would love to have you reach out to us. One thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is our smart home tracker. So every quarter, we are looking at all of the news and announcements that happen across the many sub-industries that make up the smart home space. And so we're keeping up with what's going on and giving our take on why it matters and what the impact is on the market, as well as we presented quite a bit of research today from our SMB study. And so if you're interested in that research, please reach out to Jason Paris, who's our Vice President of Business Development, and he'd be happy to help you with those products. So up next, we have that networking discussion. Our team will have put that Zoom link into probably the chat panel right here, so to make it easy to jump over there. We hope to see you there and continue our conversation, and to see you later in May at our next sessions. Thank you.